Hey, my name is Ryan Carter. I'm 27, and for the past 6 years, I've been working as an operations manager at a large logistics and distribution company in San Diego. On paper, it sounds stable. In reality, most days, I feel like I'm running on fumes. I work the regular office hours from 8 to 5, but before that and on weekends, I drive for a rideshare app and sometimes take late night delivery runs. I don't do it because I enjoy being busy. 2 years ago, my father had emergency heart surgery. The operation went well, but complications kept him in and out of hospitals and rehab for almost a year. Insurance covered part of it. The rest became a medical debt that my family had no way of paying on its own. My mother passed away while I was still in college, and my father had already spent most of his savings helping me finish school. When he got sick, walking away wasn't an option, so I kept the day job, added the early morning rides, and picked up weekend deliveries. Whatever was left after rent and groceries went straight to the hospital bills. After nearly 2 years of that schedule, exhaustion just became part of the background noise. That morning, I had already finished a long overnight delivery and was about to log off when another ride request popped up near the bar district. It was almost 6. If I took it, I'd have maybe 20 minutes to change and get to the office on time. I accepted anyway. $40 extra could cover part of my father's next prescription. When I pulled up, a young woman was leaning against a planter box in front of a closed bar. She looked about 25, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her brown hair was slightly messy, and she was holding her high heels loosely in one hand. She could barely stay upright. I sat in the car for a few seconds, thinking about canceling. I'd driven drunk passengers before and knew how messy things could get. But when she slipped and nearly fell, I couldn't just drive away. I got out, opened the back door, and kept a respectful distance. "Are you Chloe?" I asked. She looked up with unfocused eyes and nodded slowly. "I'm Ryan, your driver. Think you can get in on your own?" She tried to step forward and stumbled. I only touched her elbow to steady her, helped her into the back seat, and handed her an unopened bottle of water. Once I was back behind the wheel, I checked the app. No destination had been entered. "Where am I taking you?" I asked. Chloe stared at her phone for a long time, then shook her head. "I don't remember. At first I thought she was just too drunk to speak clearly. After a few more questions, I realized she genuinely couldn't recall the street name, the house number, or even the neighborhood. Her phone battery was at 1%. She didn't remember any family members' numbers and didn't want me calling the friends she'd been out with. I could have taken her to the nearest police station or hospital. That would have been the safest, most responsible choice. But she wasn't injured or showing signs of alcohol poisoning. She was just drunk, exhausted, and starting to panic because she couldn't remember how to get home. So I started asking simple questions instead. "Do you live near downtown?" "No." "What do you usually see when you wake up in the morning?" She closed her eyes, thinking. "The ocean. Do you live by the beach?" "There's a big gate." I kept driving north toward the coastal residential area while she gave me fragments. She mentioned a bridge, palm trees, and the smell of salt water in the morning. It wasn't much, but it was enough to head in the right direction. For almost an hour, I drove slowly, asking questions whenever she seemed awake enough to answer. Eventually, we reached a road running parallel to the water. She suddenly sat up straighter. "This looks familiar." I followed her vague directions through 2 more streets until she pointed at a tall iron gate in front of a large property. There. Behind the gate sat a spacious, modern house facing the ocean. The lawn was perfectly kept. The landscaping looked expensive but understated, and the exterior lights were still on, even though the sky was starting to brighten. It was the kind of place that quietly said money without trying to show off. Chloe leaned forward and pressed the intercom button. A few seconds later, the gate swung open. I drove in, parked near the front steps, and got out to open her door. She still couldn't walk steadily, so I supported her up the stairs to the main entrance. The door opened before I could ring the bell. A woman stood inside. She looked to be in her early to mid-40s, wearing dark slacks and a simple white button-down shirt. Her black hair was pulled back neatly. She had the kind of face that was beautiful in a sharp, no-nonsense way, and her eyes assessed everything in a single glance. She looked at Chloe first. A flicker of worry crossed her face before it disappeared behind a calm mask. Then her gaze moved to me. "I'm the rideshare driver," I said. Chloe couldn't remember the address. I had to ask a lot of questions to figure out the area. I just wanted to make sure she got home safely. The woman took Chloe's arm. "Thank you." Just 2 words. No questions about my name, no small talk, no warmth. I nodded and walked back to my car. I had no idea who she was, and I didn't expect to ever see her again. I drove straight to my apartment, changed clothes in the parking lot, grabbed a protein bar, and headed to the office. I made it 4 minutes late. Luckily, my direct manager wasn't in yet. I threw myself into work, sorting out delayed routes, handling a supplier dispute, and dealing with a sudden spike in inventory at the Western Distribution Center. By lunchtime, I had almost forgotten about the morning ride. That afternoon, every mid-level manager was called into a special meeting. The company had just changed ownership, and the new chairwoman was coming to introduce herself and outline the restructuring plan. I sat in the back row, mostly because I was tired and didn't want attention. The conference room door opened. When the woman walked in, I sat up so fast my chair creaked. It was the same woman who had opened the door for Chloe that morning. She walked to the head of the table, set down a folder, and looked around the room with the same calm, assessing expression. "My name is Evelyn Brooks," she said. "I'm the new chairwoman and CEO of Brooks Consolidated Logistics." I stared at her, my mind going completely blank. Chloe was the daughter of the new CEO, and the woman I had spoken to outside her house at 6 in the morning was now the person who held the power to decide the future of every single person in this company, including mine. I didn't sleep much that night. After the meeting ended, I stayed in my chair long after everyone else had left. My mind kept replaying the same 2 facts on a loop. The woman who opened the door for Chloe that morning was Evelyn Brooks, and Evelyn Brooks now ran the entire company. I kept telling myself I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply helped a drunk girl get home safely. But I also knew how fast stories could twist in an office. If anyone found out I had been at her house before she even started working here, people would assume things that weren't true. So I made a decision right there in the empty conference room. I would act like the morning ride never happened. I wouldn't mention Chloe to anyone. I wouldn't try to talk to Evelyn. I wouldn't even look in her direction unless I had to. It was the safest way to protect both of us. For the first week, Evelyn moved through every department like a quiet storm. She didn't call big meetings or make dramatic announcements. She just showed up, stood in corners, listened, and asked precise questions. Most of the time she appeared in the operations room late in the afternoon when the senior managers had already gone home. I tried to ignore the fact that she seemed to come in more often when I was running meetings. One Wednesday, she sat near the window for almost 40 minutes while I went over route performance with my team. She didn't say a word until the end. Then she asked why I had changed the northern delivery routes without updating the official process. I explained that the old route created 3 unnecessary bottlenecks and that I had tested the new one for 6 weeks. Average trip time had dropped by 13 minutes. She asked if I had submitted a formal proposal. I told her I had sent it twice. The first time I got no reply. The second time I was told it would be reviewed next quarter. She wrote something in a small notebook and left without another word. She came back the following week, and the week after that. I kept reminding myself that she was just doing her job, reviewing every part of the company. But I also noticed she only appeared in operations when most of the higher-ups were gone. It felt deliberate, even if I couldn't prove it. One afternoon, a driver called in with a breakdown on the highway almost 300 kilometers away. I had to coordinate a replacement truck, calm the customer, rearrange the rest of the day's deliveries, and find a place for the driver to stay overnight. When I finally hung up, I looked up and saw Evelyn standing near the door. She hadn't said anything. She just watched me for a few seconds, then turned and walked away. I didn't know at the time that she had already asked HR for my file. 6 years at the company. Started as a dispatcher and worked my way up to operations manager. Every performance review had been strong. No disciplinary issues. The drivers trusted me. What stood out most in the file were the 2 promotion offers I had turned down. Both times I gave the same reason. I couldn't handle the expanded hours. I never told anyone the real reason was my father's medical bills and the extra jobs I needed to keep paying them. I didn't want pity, and I definitely didn't want special treatment. Evelyn never asked me about any of it directly. She just kept watching. Then Chloe texted me. I was at my desk when an unknown number appeared on my phone. She said she had pulled my number from the ride history before the app deleted it. She wanted to thank me properly for getting her home that morning. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I didn't want any personal connection to the boss's daughter. Could only make things more complicated. But ignoring her completely might also look strange if she ever mentioned it to her mother. So I kept my answer short and polite. I told her she didn't need to thank me, that I had only done what anyone would do, and that I was glad she was safe. She still asked if we could meet for coffee during my lunch break. I agreed, but only because I wanted to end the conversation quickly and cleanly. We met at a small place 2 blocks from the office. Chloe looked completely different from the girl I had helped into my car. Jeans, simple shirt, hair tied back, completely sober. She looked embarrassed but clear-headed. The first thing she did was apologize for causing trouble. "You didn't cause trouble," I told her. "You needed to get home. I just drove you there. You spent almost an hour trying to figure out where I lived. I still got paid for the ride. Not enough for what you actually did." I didn't want her feeling like she owed me anything, so I changed the subject. We talked about traffic, the weather, random cafes in the city. She didn't explain why she had gotten so drunk that night, and I didn't ask. Before we left, she thanked me again. This time, I accepted it instead of brushing it off. That evening, Chloe told her mother she had met me. She said I hadn't judged her, hadn't expected anything in return, and hadn't tried to use the situation to get close to the family. After that, the way Evelyn looked at me started to change. It wasn't pity. It was more like she had finally understood why a man who left the office on time every evening still showed up the next morning, looking completely drained. A week later, I was offered the chance to lead a 6-month regional expansion project. It was the biggest opportunity I had ever been given. I would coordinate across multiple departments and report directly to the chair's office. The problem was that it required evening work and some weekends. I couldn't accept it. If I stopped driving and doing deliveries, I wouldn't have enough money for my father's monthly medical payments. If I tried to do the project on top of my 3 jobs, I would burn out fast. I declined with the same reason I had used before: limited personal availability. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, 2 senior managers who had expected the project to go to them started making my life difficult. Marcus Hale and Trevor Sands. They didn't attack me openly. They started small. A report I wrote suddenly had their team's name on it. A process improvement idea I had submitted months earlier was presented by Trevor in a leadership meeting without any mention of me. Conversations would stop whenever I walked into a room. Then the rumors began. People started saying I had some kind of personal connection to Evelyn before she even joined the company. Someone must have found out I drove Chloe home that morning, because the story got twisted into proof that I was using the boss's daughter to get close to her. In just a few weeks, 6 years of steady work started to look suspicious. Every achievement could be explained away as favoritism. Every opportunity could be seen as a reward for something that never actually happened. I realized I couldn't keep working in an environment like that. On Thursday night, after everyone else had gone home, I opened a new document and wrote my resignation letter. I didn't send it right away. I left it in my drafts for 4 days, reading it over and over to make sure I wasn't making an impulsive decision. During those 4 days, nothing got better. Marcus kept taking credit for my ideas. Trevor kept making comments in meetings about how important positions should go to people whose achievements were independently verified. He never said my name, but he didn't have to. Every time he spoke, a few people in the room would glance in my direction. I had saved every email, every timestamp, every original version of the documents they were claiming as their own. But I didn't file a complaint. I had seen what happened to people who accused senior managers of stealing work. Marcus and Trevor had more connections than I did, and I was already being accused of having a relationship with the CEO. If I asked Evelyn to get involved, the rumors would only get worse. If I stayed silent, my work would keep getting taken from me. So leaving seemed like the only way to take back control. On Monday morning, I came in earlier than usual. I opened the resignation letter one last time, read it through, and hit send. Then I made coffee and started checking the root reports like I did every other day. I didn't feel relieved, just empty. Like I had finally accepted that I was about to lose something I had spent years building. I sent the resignation on Monday morning and then went about my day like nothing had changed. I checked root reports, handled a supplier issue, and answered the usual flood of emails. The only difference was the hollow feeling in my chest. I kept expecting to feel some kind of relief, but it never came. Instead, there was just this quiet emptiness, like I had finally accepted that I was walking away from 6 years of work that no longer felt like mine. What I didn't know was that Dale Whitmore, my direct manager, had seen the draft of my resignation letter a few days earlier when he came into my office to discuss something. He hadn't read the whole thing, but he understood enough to know what I was planning. Later that same day, he mentioned to Evelyn that one of the strongest operations managers in the company was preparing to leave. Evelyn didn't call me into her office right away. She knew that if she stepped in too directly to protect me, it would only confirm the rumors people were already spreading. Instead, she did something quieter. She asked for access to the full document history in the system and started looking through everything herself. She found the proposal I had submitted 8 months earlier about changing the northern delivery routes. She saw the exact time it was created, the email I sent, and who received it. Then she found the presentation Marcus had given recently. It used almost the exact same method and data, except my name had been removed. She kept digging. A logistics analysis I had done 6 weeks earlier had been folded into a senior-level report under Trevor's team name. 2 staffing recommendations I had made for the Western Distribution Center had been ignored, and later Marcus and Trevor used the resulting problems to criticize my team's performance. Every file had timestamps, edit histories, and digital signatures. She didn't need to take my word for anything. The system itself proved what had been happening. The quarterly performance review meeting was scheduled for Wednesday morning. Everyone important was there: managers, team leads, HR representatives, and the full leadership team. Evelyn sat at the head of the table with a thick folder in front of her. Marcus presented first. He introduced a new cross-regional coordination method that supposedly reduced delivery errors by 11%. It was the exact proposal I had submitted 8 months earlier. I recognized every slide. I didn't react. I just wrote a single line in my notebook to keep my hands from clenching into fists. Trevor presented next. Near the end of his section, he made a comment about how the company needed to make sure key positions went to people whose achievements were independently verified, rather than those who benefited from special circumstances. Several people turned to look at me. I kept my face neutral. When it was my turn, I stood up and gave the report I had prepared. I spoke only about numbers, driver shortages, inventory issues, and risks at the Western Center. I didn't complain. I didn't mention what Marcus and Trevor had done. I had already sent my resignation. I just wanted to finish my responsibilities cleanly. After I sat down, Evelyn placed her pen on the table. "I have a few matters that need to be clarified before we continue," she said. Her voice was calm, but the entire room went silent. She opened the folder. She stated that the coordination method Marcus had just presented had been created and formally submitted by me 8 months earlier. She placed printed copies showing the creation time and edit history on the table. Marcus started to say something about it being a team effort. Evelyn looked at him and said, "I'm not finished." She continued with the logistics analysis that had been stripped of my name, the emails I had sent that received no response, and the staffing proposals that had been ignored while Marcus and Trevor later criticized the consequences. Every document had clear evidence attached. This is not an administrative mistake, Evelyn said. This is a systematic pattern of transferring one employee's work to others and undermining his professional reputation. No one spoke. She announced that Marcus and Trevor would be placed under formal investigation by HR. Until the investigation concluded, both of them would be removed from any decisions involving the operations department. Then she said something I would remember for a long time. When a company cannot accurately identify who is actually creating value, it doesn't just lose talent. It also loses the ability to understand itself. The rest of the meeting continued, but I barely heard any of it. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt that someone had believed in my work enough to go looking for proof, even though I had never asked her to. After the meeting, Evelyn didn't come over to speak with me. She talked briefly with the head of HR and then left the room. I went back to my desk. About 10 minutes later, an email arrived from the chair's office. My resignation letter had been received, but before processing it, Evelyn wanted to meet with me at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I arrived on time. Her office door was open. She gestured for me to sit, then told me directly that she understood why I wanted to leave and that she would not try to force me to withdraw the letter. "I know my attention to your work has unintentionally created problems for you," she said. "You didn't ask for it, and there was no clean way to prevent it. That part is on me." "I don't blame you," I answered. "I know." She looked at me for a long moment. "That's also part of the problem. You always handle everything yourself, including consequences that aren't yours to carry." I asked why she had spent the time digging through all the document histories. Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Because I've worked with enough people to tell the difference between someone who performs integrity and someone who actually lives it." I didn't know how to respond. No leader had ever spoken to me that directly before. Then she made a different offer. She wanted to restructure the project lead position I had been offered earlier. The scope would be adjusted so it no longer required unreasonable evening and weekend hours. The compensation would also be increased to match the actual responsibility. "Chloe told me about your father's medical debt," Evelyn said. "I have no right to interfere in your personal life. But I do have a responsibility to make sure the company isn't paying so little that one of its best employees has to work 2 extra jobs just to survive." I looked at her, feeling both grateful and uncomfortable at the same time. "I don't want a position because you know my personal situation. You're not receiving it because of your situation." She slid the updated job description across the desk. "You're receiving it because you're the right person for it. Your situation only made me realize how much the old structure was demanding and how little it was giving back." I didn't answer right away. I had been working 3 jobs for 2 years. I had stopped imagining what it would feel like to have only one source of income. Evelyn didn't push. She simply asked me to think about it before deciding. As I stood to leave, I turned back. "What you did in the meeting today mattered to me," I said. Evelyn looked at me. "You did the work," she replied. "I only made sure people read the right name." That evening, I withdrew my resignation. I accepted the new position after 3 days of thinking it through carefully. It wasn't because I felt grateful to Evelyn. I reviewed the actual responsibilities, the adjusted hours, the reporting structure, and the goals. Only when I was certain the role was based on what I could deliver, not on anything else, did I sign the offer. The new salary was enough for me to stop the overnight deliveries first. After that, I began cutting back on rideshare shifts gradually. On the last morning I drove, I parked in a cafe lot after dropping off a passenger and just sat there with the app open on my phone. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute before finally logging out. There was no big feeling of victory, only a strange, unfamiliar quiet. For the first time in 2 years, I could go home after work without calculating how many more trips I needed to make that night to cover my father's next payment. The debt was still there, but now I could finally see the end of it. The new project required more direct meetings with Evelyn. We kept very clear boundaries. She never brought up the morning I drove Chloe home during work hours. She didn't give me any special treatment in meetings. If anything, she sometimes challenged my proposals more strictly than she did with others. I found that I didn't mind. Evelyn always pointed out real weaknesses. She never tried to diminish me, and she never turned disagreement into a power struggle. I started respecting the way she led, not just the position she held. Over time, I also began to see the loneliness behind her composed exterior. She arrived at the office before anyone else and usually left after everyone had gone. She could manage thousands of employees, but she seemed uncertain how to talk to her own daughter. Chloe had started therapy after that night. The drunk evening had been the same night she discovered her boyfriend had been cheating on her with someone in their shared friend group. She was slowly repairing her relationship with her mother and trying to figure out what she actually wanted to do with her life. One evening, after a long meeting, I walked past Evelyn's office and saw her still sitting alone at her desk. The coffee cup in front of her had gone cold. Her coat was still hanging on the back of her chair. From the tired look in her eyes, I guessed she hadn't eaten dinner yet. I knocked lightly on the open door. "Have you eaten anything yet?" She looked up, clearly surprised by the question. "No. I was going to that small place 2 blocks away. They're still open." Evelyn studied me for a few seconds, the way she always did when she was deciding whether something crossed a line. I understood her hesitation, so I added, "We can keep talking about the project. I just don't want to have to explain to the board tomorrow why the chairwoman passed out at her desk." The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. It was the first time I had seen her almost smile. She took her coat. We walked to a small restaurant and chose a table near the window. At first, we only discussed the project. Then, without either of us really noticing when it happened, the conversation moved beyond work. Evelyn told me she had taken over the company after years of running other corporations. Her father had founded the business but had always believed a woman wasn't tough enough to hold real power for long. She had spent nearly 30 years proving him wrong. In exchange, she had missed most of Chloe's childhood and gone through a divorce that never really healed. "I always thought I would fix everything once the work was stable," she said. "But the work never becomes stable." I told her about my father and the surgery, about watching someone who had always taken care of me become dependent on others, and about the helplessness that came with it. I didn't complain. I just explained why I had lived the way I had for the past 2 years. That night, for the first time, I stopped seeing Evelyn only as the chairwoman. I saw a woman who had spent most of her life carrying responsibility and had forgotten how to admit she was tired. After dinner, we walked back to the parking lot. Evelyn stood beside her car and said, "Thank you. I don't remember the last time I had dinner without checking my phone. Tomorrow you can go back to being the scary chairwoman." Am I scary? No one in the company dares to tell you the truth, but yes. She actually laughed. From that evening on, something existed between us that was difficult to name. It wasn't ordinary friendship. It wasn't romance yet either. It was simply a deepening trust between two people who had seen each other at imperfect moments. We were still careful. Evelyn was the chairwoman, and I reported to her office. One wrong move could bring every old rumor back to life. So at work we remained completely professional, but after hours we sometimes had dinner or coffee by the water. We didn't hide it, but we also didn't announce it. Chloe noticed before either of us was ready. One evening she came home unexpectedly and found me in the home office helping Evelyn fix a loose shelf. Chloe leaned against the doorframe, looked at both of us, and asked directly, "Are you two dating?" I almost dropped the screwdriver. Evelyn answered in her coldest voice that we were discussing work matters. Chloe looked at the shelf, then at the tools in my hands. "Does company work now involve furniture repair?" Evelyn didn't reply. Chloe laughed and walked toward the kitchen. Before she left the room, she said quietly to me, "I don't object. Just don't hurt my mother." That sentence made me realize whatever was happening between Evelyn and me had already gone beyond occasional dinners. That same night, I told Evelyn we needed to define what we were doing. She stood by the window, looking out at the ocean. "I'm almost 20 years older than you," she said. "I know. I'm the chairwoman of the company where you work. I know that too. Even if we do nothing wrong, people will still assume you got promoted because of me. That's why we have to settle the work side before anything else." Evelyn turned to look at me. I suggested transferring my direct supervision to another vice president. Every decision about my compensation, evaluation, or promotion would go through an independent committee. If we were going to have a relationship, it could not be allowed to affect anyone's career, including mine. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. After a while, she walked closer. "How long have you been thinking about this?" she asked. "Longer than I want to admit. And you really want to try?" I looked at the woman who had opened the door for me the morning we didn't know each other, the woman who had protected my work when I was already prepared to walk away. Yes. For the first time, Evelyn didn't hide behind logic. She reached up and touched my face lightly, then kissed me. The kiss was short, careful, and not impulsive at all. It felt like confirmation of something that had been quietly forming between us for months. Before we officially started dating, Evelyn and I reported the relationship to the board and HR. I was moved to report directly to the vice president of operations. Evelyn no longer took part in any decisions about my compensation, performance reviews, or promotions. Every major decision concerning my career now went through an independent committee. The announcement created talk exactly as we expected. Some people said the old rumors had finally turned out to be true. Others claimed I had been calculating from the beginning, even though our relationship only began long after I had been cleared and given the new role. This time I didn't run. I knew my work record was documented and verifiable. More importantly, I no longer wanted people who didn't understand the full story to decide who I was allowed to care about. The relationship wasn't simple. Evelyn was used to controlling outcomes. I had spent years refusing to let anyone else decide things for me. The biggest fight happened when I found out she had quietly contacted the hospital to pay off the remaining balance of my father's medical debt. When I confronted her, she said she just wanted to help. I told her I didn't need her to rescue me. She said she only wanted to remove one burden from my life. The argument lasted nearly an hour. In the end, she admitted that using money and authority to solve problems was the only way she had ever known how to help people. I told her I needed a partner, not someone managing my life for me. After that night, she stopped trying to fix things behind my back. Instead, she helped me meet a financial advisor who restructured the remaining debt into a clear repayment plan with lower interest. I still paid every cent myself, but now I could finally see the finish line without working myself into the ground. My father was surprised when he first met Evelyn. He looked at her, then at me, and pulled me aside. "Are you sure that woman actually likes you?" he asked quietly. "Or is she planning to buy the hospital so you don't have to pay the bill?" I had to bite back a smile. But during dinner, he watched how Evelyn helped him stand without making him feel weak. She never mentioned her title. She didn't ask intrusive questions about his health. She simply treated him like a person. Before she left, my father said to her, "Ryan lives like every burden has to be carried by him alone. If you're with him, don't let him keep doing that." Evelyn looked at me and answered, "I'm trying." Chloe was also doing better. After months of therapy, she decided to study counseling psychology. She wanted to work with young people dealing with emotional crises and alcohol issues. One evening, she told me that if I hadn't stopped the car that morning, she had no idea where she would have woken up or what might have happened to her. "I just did what anyone would have done," I said. "Not everyone does," she answered. 2 years after Evelyn took over the company, the regional expansion project I had led was completed ahead of schedule. The new system significantly reduced operating costs and improved schedules for hundreds of drivers. I was offered the position of Regional Director of Operations. The decision came from the independent board. Evelyn had no involvement in it. I accepted. By the end of that year, the last of my father's medical debt was paid in full. The night the final confirmation came through, Evelyn drove me to the beach house. Chloe had prepared a small dinner. My father was there too. There was no big celebration, just 4 people around a table and a cake Chloe had bought in the wrong flavor. It was one of the most peaceful evenings I could remember. After dinner, Evelyn and I walked down to the water. The waves came in quietly under the lights from the house. I took the small box out of my jacket pocket. Evelyn saw it but didn't say anything. I used to think my life would just be work, paying off debt, and then finding the next problem to solve, I said. The morning I picked up Chloe, I didn't think I was doing anything special. I just saw someone who couldn't get home on her own and decided not to leave her there. I opened the box. But that ride brought me to your front door. Later, you walked into the company and saw value in my work even when I had stopped believing it was worth protecting. Evelyn shook her head slightly, her eyes already bright. You protected it yourself for 6 years, she said. I only found the proof. That's exactly what you always say. I got down on one knee. Evelyn Brooks, you are the most difficult, most stubborn, and most honest person I have ever met. Will you marry me and keep arguing with me about every important decision for the rest of our lives? She laughed even as tears ran down her face. I'm much older than you. You already use that excuse. You still have time to change your mind. You know I don't decide things quickly. I looked at her. I've thought about it long enough. Evelyn nodded. Then yes. I stood up, slipped the ring onto her finger, and held her while the waves moved against the shore. We had a small wedding the following spring on the lawn facing the ocean. My father sat in the front row. Chloe stood beside her mother the entire ceremony. A few close colleagues came, including Dale and some of the drivers who had worked with me from the beginning. In her vows, Evelyn said, I was the first person who had seen her daughter at her worst without judging her, seen her at her most exhausted without being afraid, and seen her power without ever trying to use it. In mine, I said Evelyn had taught me that accepting help did not mean being weak. Sometimes self-respect was not about carrying everything alone, but about recognizing who truly wanted to stand beside you. After the wedding, Evelyn remained chairwoman. I continued in my role under the independent oversight system. We never tried to turn our family into a perfect story. Evelyn and Chloe still disagreed sometimes. My father still needed regular checkups. Evelyn and I still argued because she wanted to control everything, and I still had the habit of hiding when things were difficult. But we stopped walking away when things became uncomfortable. One weekend morning, I drove Evelyn and Chloe past the old planter box where I had picked Chloe up that first morning. Chloe pointed out the window. Right there. Evelyn looked at me. You could have canceled the ride. I thought about it. Then why didn't you? I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Because she needed someone to stop. Evelyn placed her hand over mine on the steering wheel. I had once thought that morning was just one last ride before work. A small thing I would forget after I got paid. But sometimes life doesn't change because of big decisions. It changes when one person stops for a stranger, does something kind without expecting recognition, and then continues with their day as if nothing important had happened. I drove Chloe home that morning, but in a way none of us understood at the time, that single ride also brought me to the place I was meant to be.